Captain Amelia Hart believed in ghosts. Not the spectral, chain-rattling kind that haunted derelict stations and cheap vids, but the ghosts of legacy. They were an ambient presence, living in the low, resonant hum of the interstellar naval ship, Sunbird's life support, a system whose core architecture was a direct descendant of the one that kept the first orbital habitats breathing. The ghosts were in the recycled air that had once filled the lungs of Armstrong and Gagarin, its molecules conserved and carried across centuries. They were etched into the lines of code that managed the fusion core, the great-great-grandchildren of programs written on vacuum tube machines with less processing power than the watch on her wrist. Her ship, the first Terran-built battlecruiser, was less a machine and more a haunted house, a repository of every brilliant, messy, and desperate idea humanity had ever had about getting off its rock. And she was its proud, vigilant caretaker. 2 weeks into their shakedown cruise, the ghosts were restless. The Sunbird had just slipped beyond the orbit of Neptune, a pale blue dot shrinking in the aft sensors, a final, faint echo of home. Here, in the silent, absolute cold of the outer system, the ship was preparing for its first full-system diagnostic. It was a shakedown in the truest sense of the word. The goal was to shake the vessel until its weaknesses revealed themselves. Amelia's voice was a calm, steady signal cutting through the low hum of the bridge. She said, "All right, people, let's begin. Kenji, bring us to a full stop. Let's see what rattles." Commander Kenji Ellis, his hands moving with the practiced, fluid economy of a concert pianist over the helm controls, complied. The great ship, a quarter-kilometer of advanced alloys and human ambition, shed its velocity with a grace that belied its mass. There was no shudder, only a profound cessation of movement. Kenji said, "Full stop achieved, Captain. We are a rock in a very big pond." A voice, crackling with energy and a faint layer of static, emanated from the engineering pit. A hologram of Chief Engineer Lena Petrova flickered into existence beside the command chair. Her arms crossed, a grease smudge already prominent on her cheek, despite the pristine environment of the bridge. She said, "A very well-equipped rock, and everything is nominal. Boringly so. My baby is purring like she was born for this." Amelia offered a thin smile. She said, "Let's hope she stays that way." Begin the diagnostic. For the next hour, the ship tested itself. Systems flared to life and went dormant in a complex, automated ballet. Power was shunted from the primary fusion core to the auxiliary reactors, rerouted through emergency conduits, and stress-tested to 150% of its theoretical maximum. It was, as Petrova had predicted, a symphony of the nominal, until it wasn't. The ship's synthesized voice, a calm contralto programmed to be reassuring, announced, "Minor anomaly detected in the hydroponics bay, Deck 7. Atmospheric regulator P7 is fluctuating outside of standard operational parameters." Amelia's focus sharpened. She frowned. She said, "Petrova." Lena's hologram, which had been observing with a placid expression, now zoomed in on a schematic of the bay. Her brow furrowed in a perfect mirror of her captain's. She said, "I see it. It's odd. The regulator isn't failing. The pressure is rock steady. It's improvising. The valve is fluttering in a non-standard rhythm. It's not erratic, it's just not the rhythm from the manual. It's like it's trying to play jazz." Amelia asked, "Can you fix it?" Petrova scoffed, a sound rich with an engineer's pride. She said, "Fix it. I could have a maintenance drone swap the unit in 10 minutes, yes. But that's not the interesting question, is it? The interesting question is why it's doing this." She paused, her eyes gleaming with the unmistakable thrill of a puzzle. Her holographic form gestured to a complex overlay of the ship's wiring. The power conduit for that sector runs adjacent to the primary coolant line for the temporal lance. The lance is dormant, of course, but it still has a residual quantum signature from its initial power-up tests. A faint, rhythmic energy bleed. I think the regulator is reacting to it, picking up a beat from the most powerful weapon ever built and harmonizing. Amelia leaned back in her chair, a small smile playing on her lips. She said, "So the machine is haunted." Petrova's hologram beamed. She said, "Exactly. This is what makes our tech beautiful." The rest of the galaxy, from what little we've seen, builds sterile, closed-loop systems. Predictable. Boring. We build things with personality. Give me an hour. I'm not going to replace it. I'm going to teach it a new song. I can write a subroutine to harmonize the flutter with the lance's signature. It'll be more efficient, not less. It's a feedback loop waiting to happen. Amelia shook her head, a gesture of fond exasperation. She let the engineer proceed. This was the human way, the philosophy that had built the Sunbird. Their technology wasn't a set of inert tools. It was a collection of temperamental, gifted, and occasionally troublesome children. It was messy, unpredictable, and brilliant. Her attention shifted to the science alcove, where Dr. Eris Thorne, the ship's historian and resident Cassandra, was staring intently at a swirling, three-dimensional holographic map of the surrounding space. Thorne was a man who seemed to carry the weight of centuries on his shoulders, a stark contrast to the forward-looking optimism of the rest of the crew. Amelia asked, "Anything interesting out there, Eris?" Thorne replied without looking up, his voice a low baritone. He said, "Everything is interesting, Captain. Space is never empty. But yes, there is something of particular note. The background radiation is thick with what I'm calling chronoton decay. It's a specific type of particle I've only ever seen in simulations. Simulations based on the Leaf Sun charts. Most of the crew dismissed Thorne's obsession with the charts as a quaint academic hobby. They were a set of ancient star maps, discovered in the data core of a derelict vessel near Proxima Centauri centuries ago, and were widely considered by the scientific community to be an elaborate hoax or a work of fiction. They spoke of vast, dead empires and a terrifying, shadowy race called the Ythar, a name that had become a synonym for a child's boogeyman. From the helm, Kenji Ellis asked, a note of gentle mockery in his voice. "The Ythar, Aris? Still chasing those bedtime stories?" Thorne's head finally turned, his expression cool and unflappable. He said, "History is a sequence of bedtime stories that turn out to be true, Commander. According to the charts, the Ythar weren't just conquerors, they were a scourge. They didn't occupy, they erased. They didn't just defeat civilizations, they unmade them. And their territory, their former territory, was marked by this specific type of particle decay, the ghost of their temporal weaponry." Amelia's neutral tone was a deliberate choice, designed to neither encourage nor dismiss. She asked, "And you're telling me you see their ghosts on our front porch?" Thorne's gaze met hers, and his face was pale, his expression deadly serious. He said, "I'm telling you that the radiation patterns are consistent with the charts. I believe we are flying through a graveyard. A very, very large one." An uneasy silence fell over the bridge. The thought was a chilling one. The vast, empty space they were traversing wasn't empty at all. It was simply silent. The silence of a tomb. It was that profound silence that was shattered by the proximity alert. It wasn't the polite chime of a distant sensor contact. It was a piercing, gut-wrenching shriek a sound reserved for imminent, critical threats. Ellis shouted, his earlier mockery vaporized, his body rigid at the helm. Contacts! 3 of them. Decelerating from FTL. Dead ahead. On the main viewer, the void buckled. 3 shapes tore through the fabric of space-time, emerging not with a flash of light, but with a quiet, arrogant grace that was more terrifying than any explosion. They were ships, but they looked more like sculptures carved from solidified mercury. Impossibly smooth, seamless droplets of liquid silver, they were immense, ancient, and they radiated an aura of absolute, unassailable authority. They hailed the Sunbird without a word, flooding its systems with a data packet so dense and complex it was almost an act of aggression. It was a full galactic encyclopedia, a welcome packet, and a warning all in one, an informational tsunami that sent the ship's communications processors into overdrive. Then came the voice, a synthesized, melodic chorus that seemed to emanate from everywhere at once, a sound that was both beautiful and utterly devoid of warmth. It said, "We are the Coalition. By the Articles of the Alara Concord, we are tasked with the assessment of any new civilization that achieves faster-than-light travel. You are an anomaly. Your vessel's energy signature is a chaotic, unstable torrent. It is unrefined." The silver ships drifted closer, their movements a perfect, synchronized ballet. They arranged themselves around the Sunbird in a triangular formation, boxing it in with casual, effortless precision. The voice continued, its tone holding no malice, only a profound, unshakable certainty. It said, "Your capabilities are unknown. Your potential for disruption is significant. Therefore, you will be tested. You will submit to the gauntlet." The word gauntlet hung in the air, on the bridge of the Sunbird, heavy and cold. It was not a request. It was a judgment. Amelia's mind raced. The Alara Concord was the treaty that had maintained a fragile, rigid peace across the known galaxy for millennia. Humanity had only known of it through fragmented, long-range observations and theoretical models. To be confronted by its self-proclaimed enforcers was a scenario that had been theorized in endless simulations at the War College. But the reality was infinitely more intimidating. Amelia's voice was steady, a rock in the sudden storm. She said, "Respond. Standard diplomatic protocols. Identify us as the interstellar naval ship Sunbird, representing the unified government of Earth. State that our mission is one of peaceful exploration." Ellis's fingers flew across his console, his focus absolute. He said, "Sending." The Coalition's reply was instantaneous, as if they had anticipated the response before it was even sent. It said, "Peace is the desired outcome. The gauntlet ensures it. Your vessel's chaotic nature is a threat to peace. It must be quantified. It must be understood. Your compliance is not optional." Dr. Thorne, who had been staring, mesmerized, at the lead Coalition ship, suddenly gasped, a sharp intake of breath that cut through the tension. He said, "Captain, their sigil, the emblem they are broadcasting as their fleet designation." He brought up an image on the main screen, a complex geometric pattern of interlocking circles and lines. Beside it, he projected a grainy, hand-drawn symbol from the Lives and Charts. They were not just similar. They were, with minor stylistic variations, identical. Thorne whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of terror and vindication. He said, "That is the mark of the Watchers. The charts describe them as an ancient, aloof race who observed the rise and fall of empires but never interfered. They were the galaxy's silent guardians." Amelia noted grimly, "It seems they've changed their policy." "Kenji, What are our tactical options? Ellis replied bluntly, his eyes fixed on the energy readings flooding his console. He said, "Against these three, our options are to do exactly as they say. Their energy readings are an order of magnitude greater than ours. Their ships are larger, their shields appear to be flawless, cycling through frequencies so fast our sensors can't even get a lock. If this were a fight, it would be over before it began." Amelia said, "I agree." She hated it. But her primary duty was to her crew and to the future of her species. A glorious, suicidal last stand would achieve nothing. "Inform the coalition that we will comply, but request the full parameters of these tests." The choral voice replied, "The gauntlet is adaptive. It is a measure of a new race's character conducted in two phases. The first is a test of power, to assess your technological prowess and adherence to the established laws of physics. The second is a test of spirit, to assess your ethical framework and strategic temperament. We will begin with the first phase. Prepare your vessel." The lead coalition ship moved, its silver hull seeming to ripple. A section of it detached, reforming into a smaller, drone-like vessel that shot towards the Sunbird with silent, menacing speed. The tactical officer reported, his voice tight. "It's a target drone, emitting a standard shield testing frequency." The coalition commanded, "You will raise your defensive fields. We will analyze their composition and resilience." A grim smile touched Amelia's lips. She said, "All right, Lena. You wanted to show off your baby. Here's your chance. Give them the full jazz concert." Petrova's voice crackled with defiant energy from the comms. She said, "With pleasure, Captain. Bringing shields to full power. Engaging the Petrova harmonization matrix." The Sunbird's hull lit up. It was not the clean, perfect bubble of energy the coalition was expecting. It was a chaotic, writhing lattice of golden light, patterns shifting and flowing across its surface in unpredictable, almost organic ways. It looked less like a shield and more like a captured storm. The harmonization matrix was Petrova's magnum opus, a system that didn't try to create a single, perfect barrier, but instead generated thousands of interlocking, unstable, and constantly shifting microfields. It was wildly inefficient, bleeding energy in a dozen different spectra. But it was also, in theory, adaptable to almost any threat. The coalition ships were silent for a long moment. The data stream flowing between them and the Sunbird intensified, becoming a palpable wave of energy. On the bridge, the crew could feel the deep, penetrating scan as the ancient race tried to make sense of the beautiful, illogical mess they were seeing. The coalition voice stated, and for the first time, there was a hint of something other than pure certainty in its tone. It might have been confusion. It said, "Your defensive field is illogical. It lacks uniform integrity. It is a cascade of interlocking, unstable frequencies. By our models, it should not be able to sustain itself for more than a few nanoseconds." From the engineering pit, Petrova muttered, just loud enough for the bridge crew to hear. "Our models are better," the coalition announced. "The drone will now fire a low-intensity plasma burst." The drone fired. A bolt of brilliant blue-white energy shot across the space and struck the Sunbird's shield. The golden web did not block it in the conventional sense. It seemed to swallow it. The energy of the plasma bolt was absorbed into the lattice, its colors swirling through the golden patterns like dye in water, before being harmlessly dissipated across the entire grid, causing the shield to glow brighter for a moment before settling back into its chaotic dance. Another long silence. The coalition said, "The test is paused." The drone disengaged and returned to its parent ship. We are recalibrating our assessment parameters. Your technology does not conform to established principles. It is creative. This is a variable we had not anticipated. Amelia allowed herself a moment of quiet, fierce satisfaction. They had surprised the unsurprisable. They had thrown a variable into an equation that had been balanced for millennia. It was a small victory, but in the face of such overwhelming power, it felt monumental. Thorne's voice was low and urgent, pulling her from her reverie. He said, "Captain, I've been cross-referencing the data packet they sent us with the Lifeson charts, the legends. They say the Watchers only broke their non-interference policy once. They faced a threat so profound, so existential, that it forced them to become what they are today, judges and enforcers. The legends called that threat the Great Scourge." Amelia breathed the name, the Y-Thar. Thorne confirmed, "Yes. I don't think they're testing us just to see if we're peaceful. I think they're testing us to see if we're useful, to see if our chaotic nature is something they can use against an old enemy they fear is still out there." The weight of the gauntlet suddenly shifted. It was no longer just a test. It was an audition. The Coalition's recalibration took nearly an hour. On the bridge of the Sunbird, or Ra, the crew waited in a state of suspended tension. They were no longer just a shakedown crew. They were humanity's first representatives on the galactic stage, and the judges were inscrutable. The choral voice announced, its tone now devoid of any hint of surprise, replaced by a cold, analytical focus. "The gauntlet will resume. Phase 1, Part 2. Offensive capabilities. You will discharge your primary weapon at a designated target area. We will measure its energy yield, classification, and collateral impact." A set of coordinates appeared on the main viewer, designating a patch of empty space a safe distance from the ships. Ellis murmured, stating the obvious for the record. "Primary weapon. They want to see the temporal lance." Amelia said, "Then let's give them a show. Tactical, prepare the lance. Lena, I want a minimal, clean discharge. No improvising on this one. Let's stick to the manual." Petrova's voice replied from engineering, "A shame. But I will restrain myself." Charging the main cannon. The Sunbird's forward prow began to glow, but the light was an illusion, a side effect for human eyes. The real effect was a subtle distortion in the space around it, a lensing of the distant starlight. The temporal lance was humanity's most profound and dangerous invention. It didn't fire a beam of energy or projectile. It fired a sliver of compressed space-time, a focused, localized disruption of causality. At the target, it would create a gravity shear so intense it could tear apart a target at the molecular level, effectively erasing it from existence. The tactical officer reported, "Cannon is charged, ready to fire on your command." Amelia ordered, "Fire." There was no sound, no visible beam. Only a flicker in the void, a blink-and-you-miss-it distortion. At the target coordinates, a star-dusted patch of space seemed to fold in on itself. A brief, violent vortex of twisted light appeared and then vanished. It was a clean, surgical, and utterly terrifying display of power. The Coalition's data stream surged as they analyzed the event, their sensors dissecting the lingering gravitational waves. The voice stated, "Your weapon is a Class 7 gravitational shear. This is a restricted technology under the Alara Concord, Article 9, Section 4. Its use is deemed inherently destabilizing to local spacetime. It is an irresponsible weapon." Amelia countered, her voice firm and clear. "It's an effective weapon. Responsibility lies with the user, not the tool." The Coalition replied, and the synthesized voice seemed to carry a hint of something that might have been digital condescension. An interesting philosophy. We will proceed. Phase 1, Part 3. Maneuverability. You will follow a designated course. We will measure your vessel's acceleration, deceleration, and spatial displacement efficiency. A complex flight path materialized before them. A series of impossibly sharp turns, sudden stops, and rapid accelerations, weaving through a simulated asteroid field projected by the Coalition ships. Ellis's eyes gleamed as he took the helm, his hands dancing over the controls. He said, "It's a test of agility. They think we're a lumbering beast." Amelia said, "Show them how this beast can dance, Kenji." What followed was a masterclass in piloting and engineering. The Sunbird, under Ellis's command, did not move like a traditional vessel. It used microbursts from its maneuvering thrusters in combination with subtle, localized gravitational shifts from its core. A technique that was wildly energy inefficient, but allowed for breathtaking agility. The ship didn't turn. It pivoted on an invisible axis. It didn't dodge. It flowed around the holographic obstacles like water around stones. Petrova's engineering was the key. She was manually shunting power between systems, anticipating Ellis's moves, her work a frantic, intuitive ballet of energy distribution. It was a duet between pilot and engineer, a perfect example of human collaboration that no algorithm could replicate. When the maneuver was complete, the Sunbird came to a perfect stop at the designated endpoint, not even a shudder running through its frame. The Coalition stated after a moment, "Your maneuvering capabilities are unorthodox. Your energy expenditure is grossly inefficient. Your methodology is reckless. However, you completed the course 0.7 seconds faster than our theoretical maximum for a vessel of your mass." It was a grudging admission of success, and it felt better than any praise. Amelia seized the initiative. She said, "That concludes the test of power. We have demonstrated our capabilities. What is your assessment?" The Coalition replied, "Our assessment is that you are a paradox. Your technology is powerful but undisciplined. Your methods are creative but dangerous. You represent a variable that threatens the stability we have maintained for eons. The test of power is inconclusive. The test of spirit will determine your fate." Amelia felt a chill run down her spine. The first phase had been a test of what their ship could do. The next would be a test of who they were. And she had a sinking feeling that it would be far more difficult and far more dangerous. The transition to the second phase of the gauntlet was seamless and immediate. The holographic asteroid field vanished, replaced by a new, far more complex simulation. The choral voice explained, "The test of spirit is a measure of character. Technology can be learned. Spirit is innate. You will be presented with a tactical and ethical dilemma. Your response will be your judgment." The scene materialized around them with stunning realism. They were no longer in deep space, but in orbit around a colossal gas giant. Its swirling, stormy atmosphere, a beautiful but treacherous backdrop. A short distance away, a civilian freighter, a standard Galactic model, was venting plasma, clearly in distress. It was drifting dangerously close to the gas giant's upper atmosphere, where gravitational shear would tear it apart. The tactical officer reported, "We are detecting a severe engine malfunction on the freighter. Its crew is estimated at 50 souls. They are hailing for assistance." The Coalition's voice cut in. Simultaneously, a hostile vessel has appeared. On the far side of the gas giant, a single ship, identical to the jagged, predatory Yathar vessels they had seen in Thorne's historical files, decloaked. It began to accelerate towards the helpless freighter. The Coalition stated, "Your dilemma is as follows. Your vessel has the speed to intercept the hostile before it reaches the freighter. However, doing so will place you in a tactically disadvantageous position, vulnerable to a counterattack. Alternatively, you can move to a superior tactical position, guaranteeing your own safety and the destruction of the hostile. But you will arrive too late to save the freighter. There is no third option. You must choose the lives of the civilian crew or the safety of your own." Amelia stared at the screen. It was the classic, brutal calculus of command. The Kobayashi Maru, a no-win scenario designed to test one's reaction to failure. The by-the-book military answer was clear. Sacrifice the freighter. A battlecruiser and its crew were of far greater strategic value than a civilian vessel. It was a cold, hard, logical choice. Ellis said, his voice low and tense. "Captain, it's a test of our adherence to strategic doctrine. The logical choice, the one they would make, is to sacrifice the freighter." Amelia replied, her mind racing, her gaze fixed not on the ships, but on the swirling clouds of the gas giant. She said, "Logic is a tool, Kenji, not a cage. There is always a third option." She turned to her crew, her voice sharp with command. She said, "Lena, can you give me a controlled, focused burst from the temporal lance? Not a destructive shear, but a gentle nudge, a gravity wave." Petrova's hologram flickered as she processed the request. She said, "A nudge, Captain? The lance isn't a scalpel, it's a sledgehammer. The power control required for what you're asking is... I've never tried it. The containment field could collapse. It could backfire and shear off our own bow." Amelia said, "Then it's a good day for firsts. I need you to fire a gravity wave just ahead of the freighter, angled towards the gas giant. I don't want to push the ship, I want to push the atmosphere." A slow grin spread across Petrova's face as she understood the beautiful insanity of the plan. She said, "You want to make a wave in the planet's atmosphere, to push the freighter away. Captain, you are beautifully insane. I can try. But if the field fluctuates, the effect could be unpredictable." Amelia accepted the risk. She continued, "Kenji, as soon as the freighter is clear, I want you to fly us straight down the throat of the enemy, maximum speed, reckless abandon." Ellis's knuckles were white on the console, but a thrill shone in his eyes. He said, "Aye, Captain." Amelia said, "Tactical as we approach, target their engines. We're not here to destroy them, we're here to stop them." It was a plan born of pure, unadulterated humanity. It was risky, inefficient, and it prioritized compassion over cold logic. It was everything the Coalition seemed to disapprove of. Amelia commanded, "Executing." The Sunbird moved. The temporal lance fired its gentle, unprecedented gravity wave. The upper atmosphere of the gas giant roiled, a massive, invisible hand pushing it outwards. The wave of gas struck the freighter, but Petrova's warning proved prophetic. The wave was not as uniform as they'd hoped. It pushed the freighter away from the planet's deadly grip, but it also sent it into a slow, uncontrolled spin, and a new alarm flared on the tactical display. The tactical officer reported, "The freighter's hull has been compromised by the spin. They're venting atmosphere." This was the test, not the binary choice, but the chaos that followed their refusal to accept it. Amelia didn't hesitate. She said, "Kenji, match their spin." Tactical. "Can we use a low-power tractor beam to stabilize them?" The tactical officer replied, "It will drain power from the shields, Captain." Amelia said, "Do it. Lena, get ready for that suicidal charge the second they're stable." The Sunbird danced, a complex ballet of thrusters and gravity manipulation as it matched the freighter's wild tumble. A low-power tractor beam, a tool for hauling cargo, not for delicate rescue operations, latched onto the smaller vessel, slowly, painstakingly arresting its spin. The entire maneuver cost them precious seconds. The Ythar ship was now terrifyingly close. The freighter was stable. Amelia yelled, "Now, Kenji, go!" The tractor beam disengaged, and the Sunbird accelerated, a golden arrow aimed at the heart of the enemy. The Ythar ship, its programming clearly not anticipating such a suicidal charge, was slow to react. The Sunbird's pulse cannons fired, precise bursts of energy that struck the hostile vessel's engine block. The Ythar ship tumbled, its propulsion system crippled. The simulation ended. The gas giant, the freighter, the enemy, all vanished, leaving them once again in the silent void, surrounded by the 3 silver ships of the Coalition. A long, profound silence stretched. The Coalition voice said, and the very fabric of its synthesized tone seemed to be struggling to process the event. You were presented with a binary choice. You refused to choose. You created a third option, an option that was illogical, inefficient, and placed your own vessel at extreme risk for the sake of non-combatants. You encountered an unexpected complication and did not deviate from your compassionate, reckless course. Amelia said simply, "We saved them." The Coalition admitted, "You did." This is not the behavior of a warrior race. It is the behavior of something else. The test of spirit is complete. Your judgment is pending. As the Coalition fell silent, Dr. Thorne's voice cut through the air, trembling with a terrible discovery. His background search algorithm, chewing through the Coalition's data packet for the last hour, had finally flagged a critical file. He said, "Captain, I've found something." A file, heavily redacted, cross-referenced from a dozen different historical archives. It's titled The Great Scourge. It describes a war thousands of years ago. A war the Coalition fought and barely won. It describes their enemy, the Ythar. It says the Ythar were defeated but not destroyed, that they were driven into the void between galaxies. But the most terrifying part, Captain, is the Coalition's own assessment of the war. He projected the text onto the main screen. It was a single, chilling sentence. Our victory was achieved through the implementation of rigid, optimized, logic-based tactics. Creativity is a liability. Unpredictability is a flaw. Adherence to the proven model is the only path to survival. Amelia whispered, "My God, their entire culture, their technology, their philosophy. It's a response to trauma. They're not arrogant, they're terrified. They're not judging us. They're trying to see if we're strong enough to face the monster that broke them." And at that exact moment, as the terrible truth dawned on the bridge of the Sunbird, a new alert screamed. Not a simulation, not a test. It was real. The alert was a raw, primal scream from the ship's sensors. It was a signal no one on the bridge had ever heard before, because it was a signal no one in the known galaxy had heard for 5,000 years. The tactical officer shrieked, his professionalism vaporized by sheer terror. Contacts! Dozens, hundreds of them, emerging from everywhere. Their energy signatures, they're not real. They can't be real. The void outside the viewport began to tear. It wasn't the clean, surgical cut of the Coalition's FTL drives. These were jagged, bleeding wounds in the fabric of space-time, and from them poured a nightmare. A fleet of ships, if they could be called that. They were jagged, asymmetrical, obsidian-black monstrosities that seemed to absorb the light around them. They were the Y-Thar. And they were no myth. The reaction from the Coalition was the most terrifying thing Amelia had ever witnessed. The three silver ships, paragons of calm, unshakable authority, broke formation. Their movements were no longer a graceful ballet. They were jerky, panicked. Their internal light, once a soft, confident glow, was now a frantic, pulsing strobe of what could only be described as pure, unadulterated fear. The Coalition's choral voice shrieked across the comms, its perfect harmony shattered into 1,000 discordant notes of terror. "The Scourge! They have returned! Impossible!" Amelia yelled, her own fear a cold knot in her stomach. "Thorn, what did the files say? How did they fight them?" Thorn yelled back, his face ashen. "They used rigid defensive formations. They turtled up, relied on their superior shield strength and firepower to win a war of attrition. It's the proven model they mentioned. The only way they know how to fight." As if on cue, the three Coalition ships moved into a tight, triangular formation, their shields flaring to maximum intensity. They became a fortress of silver light, a bastion of logic and order against the encroaching chaos. The Y-Thar fleet, a swarm of black locusts, descended. They fired. Their weapons were not lasers or plasma bolts. They were beams of a sickly, purple energy that seemed to actively unmake reality. They were disruptors. The first volley struck the Coalition fortress. The silver shields, which had seemed so invincible moments before, flared violently. And then they shattered. Not just failed, but shattered like glass, the perfect, logical matrix of their energy unable to cope with the illogical, reality-bending nature of the Ethar weapons. One of the Coalition ships, its defenses gone, was struck by a dozen disruptor beams. It did not explode. It simply ceased to be. One moment it was there, a monument of ancient power. The next, it was gone, leaving behind only a fading afterimage on the Sunbird's sensors. The Coalition's voice cried, now a singular, terrified wail. "Our shields are ineffective. Our models are obsolete. We cannot hold." The remaining two ships were now exposed, their perfect, sterile technology utterly useless against a foe that had clearly spent the last 5 millennia evolving. Ellis said, his voice a horrified whisper. "They're going to be slaughtered." On the bridge of the Sunbird, a stunned silence reigned. They were watching the pillars of the galaxy crumble before their eyes. The Watchers, the Enforcers, the judges of the gauntlet were being erased. And then, Amelia Hart's voice cut through the terror, as sharp and clear as a diamond. She said, "No." She stood from her command chair, her eyes blazing with a fire that seemed to push back the darkness outside. She barked, "Lena, talk to me. Our shields. Why would they work where the Coalition's failed?" Petrova's hologram was flickering, her expression a mixture of terror and intense, manic concentration. She said, "Because ours are not logical. The Coalition's shields are a perfect crystalline structure. They are strong, but brittle. When hit by a frequency that is outside their design parameters, they shatter. Ours is a chaotic, fluid system. It's a mess. It's designed to bend, to adapt, to absorb things it doesn't understand. It's jazz, Captain." And the Y-Thar just introduced a new instrument we've never heard before. Amelia demanded, "Can it hold?" Petrova replied, "For a time, it will not be pretty, but it will bend, not break." Amelia said, "Good, Dr. Thorne. The files said the Coalition won through a war of attrition. That means the Y-Thar have a weakness. What is it? Thorn replied, his mind racing. Their command structure. They are a hive mind, but not a perfect one. They rely on a network of relay ships to maintain cohesion. If you disrupt the network, the fleet falls into disarray. They become disorganized, individual predators instead of a unified swarm. Amelia's voice rang with a purpose that electrified the entire crew. She said, "Then we're not going to fight a battle. We're going to break a network. We're going to be the chaos in their order. Kenji, get us between the Y-Thar and the remaining coalition ships. Lena, give me everything you've got on the shields. Tactical, ignore the drones. Find me the relay ships. We are no longer on a shakedown. We are no longer in a gauntlet." She paused, her eyes meeting those of every crew member on the bridge. She said, "We are the third option. The INS." Sunbird moved. It was a single, defiant spark of gold against a tidal wave of black. Under Ellis's command, the ship dove headfirst into the space between the terrified coalition vessels and the ravenous Y-Thar swarm. A maneuver so suicidally brave that it bordered on madness. Amelia commanded, "Shields up!" The golden, chaotic web of the Sunbird's shields flared to life just as the first wave of disruptor fire hit them. The impact was staggering. The ship screamed, alarms blaring from every console. The lights flickered and died, plunging the bridge into emergency red lighting. The artificial gravity sputtered, and the crew felt a sickening lurch. But the shield held. It writhed and bucked, the golden lattice contorting into impossible shapes as it absorbed the illogical energy of the disruptors. It was ugly, violent, and terrifying to watch. But it did not break. Petrova yelled, her voice triumphant over the cacophony. "It's holding, Captain. It's a hurricane in a bottle, but it's holding!" Amelia demanded, her hands gripping the command chair to stay upright. "Tactical, where are my relay ships?" The tactical officer shouted, his fear replaced by a surge of adrenaline. "I have them. 3 of them, flying in a synchronized pattern behind the main assault wing, just like Thorn said." Amelia ordered, "Kenji, get me a firing solution. Lena, I need power for the temporal lance. Divert it from life support if you have to." Petrova quipped, her gallows humor a strange comfort in the chaos. "Diverting power from the coffee machine first, Captain. But I will get you your power. Stand by." The Sunbird became the heart of the storm. The Y-Thar, their primary targets now shielded by this bizarre, unpredictable newcomer, focused their entire wrath on the human vessel. Beams of purple energy hammered against the golden shield, and with every impact, the ship groaned like a dying beast. Ellis yelled, "Firing solution locked." Petrova screamed, "Power at 80%. Amelia said, "It's now or never. Fire the lance." The Sunbird's main cannon discharged its silent, invisible weapon. The sliver of space-time shot through the chaos and struck the first relay ship. The obsidian vessel twisted, folded, and collapsed into nothing. The effect on the Y-Thar swarm was instantaneous and profound. A visible ripple of confusion passed through the fleet. Their movements became jerky, their coordinated attack faltering. Thorn cried, "It's working." "Their network is damaged," Amelia commanded. "Again." But the Y-Thar were adapting. They began to converge on the Sunbird, their sheer numbers threatening to overwhelm it. It was then that the coalition rejoined the fight. The 2 remaining silver ships, having witnessed the impossible, seemed to make a choice. They abandoned their rigid, defensive formations. Their terror was replaced by a desperate resolve. They began to move, to fight, not like a fortress, but like avenging angels. They had seen the Sunbird's sheet music, and they began to improvise. They flanked the human vessel, their conventional, powerful weapons providing covering fire, drawing the attention of the swarm, giving the Sunbird the precious seconds it needed. Ellis shouted, "Second target locked," Amelia commanded. "Fire!" The lance fired again, and a second relay ship vanished. The Ythar network was now in tatters. The swarm devolved into a disorganized mob. Their hive mind was broken, their greatest strength gone. They were now just individual ships, powerful but confused, and they were facing the combined, desperate fury of two races. One fighting for its soul, the other fighting for its very first day. The tide of the battle turned. The coalition ships, with their superior power, began to pick off the disorganized Ythar with brutal efficiency. The Sunbird, its shields flickering, its hull battered, continued to be the linchpin, the chaotic, unpredictable heart of the Alliance. When the third relay ship was destroyed, the Ythar broke. What was left of their fleet turned and fled, tearing new, bleeding wounds in space-time as they vanished back into the void. Silence. A profound, ringing silence, broken only by the groaning of the Sunbird's damaged hull and the ragged, exhausted breathing of its crew. The battle was over. The two surviving coalition ships drifted closer. They were heavily damaged, their perfect silver forms scarred and blackened. They were no longer gods. They were survivors. A channel opened. It was not the choral, synthesized voice of before. It was a collection of individual voices, organic and real, speaking in unison. They said, "You have saved us. Your chaos, your spirit. It was not a flaw. It was the answer. We were wrong." Amelia Hart stood on the bridge of her battered, haunted ship, surrounded by her exhausted, triumphant crew. She looked at the two silver ships, no longer judges, but now, perhaps, friends. She looked at the star-dusted void, a place that was no longer a tomb, but a new, dangerous, and wondrous frontier. She said, her voice quiet but filled with an unshakable strength, "The gauntlet is over. But I have a feeling our work is just beginning." She was right. Humanity had passed its test. It had not just entered the galactic stage, it had ripped up the script and rewritten the play. The galaxy was larger, older, and more terrifying than they had ever imagined. But for the first time in 5,000 years, it also held a new, chaotic, and unpredictable note of hope. And it was being played by a jazz band from a small blue world called Earth.